You know, when you go under for surgery, you're putting an incredible amount of trust in an anesthetic to keep you safe and unconscious. For decades, that trust has really been placed in one superstar drug. But what if a new contender could do the job even better? Okay, let's dive into this. A real showdown in the world of anesthesia. All right, let's meet the reigning champion, propofol. If you've had anesthesia in the last 30 years or so, chances are you've met it too. It's the absolute go-to, the gold standard, used in millions and millions of procedures worldwide. Why? Well, because it works fast and it works reliably. It's been the king for a very, very long time.
But, even kings have their weaknesses. Propofol is notorious for causing a pretty sharp drop in blood pressure, which can definitely be risky. It also often stings when it's injected. A lot of people complain about that. Plus, it carries a risk of infection, and in some rare but very serious cases, can lead to some severe complications. For years, these are just the trade-offs doctors have had to manage.
So this just raises a huge question, right? In a field as precise and critical as anesthesia, can we actually do better? I mean, is it possible to get all the benefits of propofol, but with fewer of the risks? Well, this is where our story starts to get really interesting.
And enter the challenger. A new drug called ciprofol is stepping into the ring. It's been specifically designed to be an improved version of propofol, aiming to take the throne by fixing the very flaws we were just talking about.
So what exactly is ciprofol? Well, on a really basic level, it works in pretty much the same way as propofol. Both of these drugs are targeting what are called the GABA receptors in your brain. You can think of these as the off switches for your neurons. They calm the whole nervous system down to induce sleep. The magic, though, that's all in the details of its chemical design.
And check this out. This is what's so wild. Take a look at how small the actual change is. On the right, that's propofol's structure. On the left, ciprofol. See that little part that's highlighted? Scientists just swapped out that one little piece, the isopropyl group, for something slightly different. I mean, it looks like such a minor change, doesn't it? But that tiny tweak has absolutely massive consequences.
And here is the power of that tiny change. Because of that new molecular shape, ciprofol is just way better at latching onto those GABA receptors in the brain. And the result? Get this, it's 4 to 5 times more powerful than propofol. This means you need a much, much smaller dose to get the same effect, which could potentially mean, you guessed it, fewer side effects.
Now, being more potent in a lab is one thing, but how does this new drug perform in the real world? Under the immense pressure of a high-stakes surgery. So let's take a look at what happened when researchers put these two drugs to the ultimate test.
The setting for this showdown was a procedure called a carotid endarterectomy. It's a really delicate surgery where they clear out plaque from the main artery that supplies blood to the brain. This is exactly the kind of operation where having stable blood pressure isn't just important, it is absolutely fundamentally critical.
So the critical point is this. During this surgery, the surgeon has to temporarily clamp that major artery shut. When that happens, blood pressure has to be managed perfectly to make sure the brain is still getting enough oxygen. So the big question for the study was which drug does a better job of keeping everything stable?
And here is the answer, loud and clear, in a graph. This chart shows us the mean arterial pressure, or MAP, during the surgery. Ciprofol is the red line, propofol is the blue one. Now look closely at the time points T4 and T5. That's right when the artery is clamped. You can just see it. The red line for ciprofol is consistently higher and way more stable. It's hitting that target blood pressure zone much more effectively than the blue line for propofol.
Okay, let's just break that down. The study found that the ciprofol group reached that target blood pressure a lot faster and just more reliably during that critical clamping window. The propofol group, on the other hand, well, they struggled more. They had bigger dips in blood pressure, which meant the doctors had to intervene more often to get it back where it needed to be.
And here's a number that really drives that point home. On average, patients in the propofol group needed an extra 227 micrograms of norepinephrine. That's a powerful drug they use specifically to raise blood pressure. The ciprofol group, they just didn't need as much help to stay stable.
The study's own conclusion, which was published in Frontiers in Medicine, puts it really plainly. They said that ciprofol has clear advantages. It optimizes blood pressure control, which means less need for those support drugs and, as we're about to see, a reduction in complications after the surgery is all over.
So a flatter line on a chart is great for anesthesiologists, for sure. But what does it actually mean for the person lying on the table? This is where the benefits become incredibly personal and incredibly significant.
Look at this data on early cognitive dysfunction. We're talking about things like confusion or memory issues right after surgery. In the ciprofol group, only 8% of patients had this problem. But in the propofol group, that number jumped to nearly 25%. That is a threefold difference. It's huge. And that's because stable blood pressure during surgery directly translates to stable blood flow to the brain. It's that simple. By preventing those dangerous dips in pressure, ciprofol seems to do a much better job of protecting the brain, which leads to better cognitive outcomes for patients once they wake up.
Now, with clinical advantages like these, you can bet the market is taking notice. The global market for ciprofol was already valued at almost $500 million back in 2023. By 2032, it's projected to soar all the way to $1.2 billion. That is a massive vote of confidence from the healthcare industry.
So what's driving this? Well, it's two key things, really. The number of surgeries being performed globally is going up every single year. And with that, there's a relentless demand for anesthetics that are not just effective, but safer. Ciprofol is positioned perfectly to meet that exact demand.
So, after this head-to-head competition, what is the final verdict? Is the king about to be dethroned? Let's just recap the evidence.
The evidence really suggests that ciprofol offers superior hemodynamic stability, better blood pressure control. This leads to less need for other drugs during surgery, and maybe most importantly, a lower risk of those cognitive problems afterward. And other studies also confirm it causes less of that stinging pain on injection. It really seems to be a win on multiple fronts. And it all comes back to that tiny molecular tweak we saw earlier. It's such a powerful reminder that in medicine, sometimes the smallest changes can have the biggest impact. The real question now is whether this one small change is enough to begin a whole new era in anesthesia, one that's safer and more stable for millions of patients all around the world.